Hello, and welcome to Truth Be Told About Going Wild. This is your host, Robert Hensley, and this is the podcast inspired by the principles of personal rewilding. Last week, we started talking about the second pillar of personal rewilding, which is wild rhythms. And today, I want to continue talking about that and continue to talk about how we can pull ourselves back into alignment with the natural cycles of our universe. And first, I think that it's important for us to recognize that we have been conditioned away from those natural cycles. We see them happening. We can watch the changing of the seasons. We can see the sun rising and setting. We can see the moon rising and setting. We can see the passage of time. But what we fail to recognize is that when public education became a compulsory act, right? Yes, it was to keep children out of, or as a way of curbing childhood labor. Let's say that, to keep children out of factories. But what it did was it allowed the people who were in charge, right, the oligarchs, to start to train people, to get children used to the idea of being in an enclosed space with limited access to the outside, where they could only take breaks at certain times, where they had to follow instructions, where they were just like if they were going to work. They check in at a certain time, they check out at a certain time. And it really did create this system of creating drones, worker bees. That's not to say that it's a bad thing. I think that it's very important for education, but I think that it's also become a point now where what children are learning is very much tainted by, or colored by, I don't want to say tainted, colored by the people who are in power, the people who are controlling the education system, and how that over time has really developed maybe not the strongest or most educated generation of people. And by doing so, by taking people out of this idea of where they were working the land with their parents, where they were working in multi-generational farms, or working just in general, being outside, it started that disconnect where we started watching the clock rather than watching the natural cycles of our world. And here's what I think is really great, right? Not that we've been disconnected, but that we can get reconnected. Urban gardening, right? So many people live in urban settings. But urban gardening is on an incline, right? It's increasing across the world. And the reason for that is that people are concerned about, whether or not they're going to have access to fresh produce. They're interested in building a community where they can help each other. Humans are by nature, right, social beings, just like the trees. And so also with that comes an interest in environmental benefits, what we can do to help our save and conserve our natural resources, as well as it gives us access to nature, right? If you're living in a high rise, or if you're living in an urban setting where you have to go to a community garden, or if you're bringing nature into your immediate environment by starting to with, say, planter boxes on your balcony or in your windows, it's a way to reconnect to the natural world. So it's part of that. It's one of the tools and techniques that we talk about when we start personal rewilding, right? Nature immersion. And that, again, doesn't have to happen just by, driving out into the forest or driving out onto a glacier or, sitting by the sea. That can happen just by bringing those elements into your space, into your immediate space, physically or in the form of pictures, videos, sounds. But urban gardening is a great way to start reconnecting. And the great thing about it is it also puts us back in touch with growing cycles, right? Planting a seed, seeing that seed become a sapling or a seedling, transplanting if we have to transplant, watching it grow, tending to it, seeing it bear fruit, harvesting that fruit, knowing when it's time to cut those plants back or to pull those plants to reclaim the soil and allow for that period of rest for healthy soil for the next planting season. Taking that time in the wintertime at the end of the season to really plan and think about what comes next. What worked for you this time? What didn't work for you? How will you change that? What new things might you plant the next time around? Is a really great way to kind of put ourselves back in sync with just the natural, cyclical world, right? It's what our ancestors did, and the ancestors before them, and the ancestors before them, and it's what we are missing when we live in a commercialized world where we don't grow our own food, or we're not growing things like hemp or cotton or flax, and growing things that can be used to create fabrics and other things. So it's really a great tool for starting your personal rewilding journey, is just to start an herb garden, start growing a tomato plant, start growing some peppers, grow some beans. I know when I first started my journey, my interest really became inspired by learning about the Three Sisters planting, which is an indigenous concept of planting corn, beans, and squash together in mounds, and how before there were earth scientists telling us what fertilizers to use and how to save the soil, we had these fantastic ancestors, these indigenous tribes who had already figured it out, right? You grow the corn stalk acts as the trellis for the beans to climb. You've got the squash at the bottom whose broad leaves are blocking the sun, so there aren't as many weeds. There's nothing stopping the plants from growing, from becoming, full fruit-bearing plants. And then what that does is, the beans replace the nitrogen that is needed by the corn. The squash and things help to keep water from evaporating as quickly from the ground, so there's less need for constant watering, so there's conservation happening. They were planting these crops together in a way that allowed them to become their own little symbiotic environment in these mounds. And again, things came up together, things came up at separate times. You kind of worked through the cycles of the seasons in this mound as you harvested beans, harvested corn, harvested the squash. And as it turns out, those three vegetables or fruits have together have or create kind of the perfect dietary. It's everything you need is in those three things. So it was not just about a healthy diet. It was about healthy land. It was about honoring the natural world and working together, and working with the earth, working in nature. So there's all this wonderful stuff and ways to keep us or put us back in alignment with the natural rhythms of the world, of the universe. So Thank you again for listening today. Remember, there are 3 opportunities each week to get new content from Truth Be Told on the Club Paranormal channel on YouTube. That's Tony Sweet on Fridays with the original Truth Be Told, Bonnie Burkert on Wednesdays with Truth Be Told Transformations, and of course, Truth Be Told about going wild on Mondays, all at the same time, right? Each of our shows is at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 Eastern. And if you have comments, questions, concerns, please feel free to reach out to me. You can learn more about personal rewilding and some of what I do by visiting my website at www.rhnatureconnect.com. Again, that's rhnatureconnect.com. And I look forward to hearing from you. Until next time.